back to another video. This is my August wrap-up video, and as you can see, I did read a lot in the month of August. I think total I got through 12 books. I have a very wide range of books that I read this month, which I'm happy about, and also at the same time kind of like, what was I doing? Like, why did I want to read the books that I read? I feel like my mood was just all over the place. The month of August is actually my least favorite month of the whole year because it doesn't, like, it's still technically summer, but it doesn't feel like summer because it's so close to fall and I'm looking forward to fall, and yet it's still so freaking hot outside that I can't even enjoy the idea of getting ready for fall. I just don't like the month of August. But anyways, I do want to go through my books that I read. I know a lot of these books I talked about in different reading vlogs and stuff that I did throughout the month, so you might recognize some of them, or I might not go into a ton of detail with all of the books just because I already feel like I said my piece on a lot of them. So I'm just going to briefly go through and tell you what my ratings were. So to start out the month of August, I did finish Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. This is the author that actually wrote House of Salt and Sorrows, which I want to read eventually. I feel like I want to read that book in the summertime, so I'm going to wait until next year to read it. But I really wanted to read this one. I saw it in a bookstore when I was on vacation in Maine, and I immediately fell in love with the cover of it. It looked really pretty to me. It's a very floppy book, which is very satisfying. And it just sounded really intriguing. So the back, the little blurb at the top says, "The heart's desire always comes with a price." I had mixed feelings about this book when I finished it. I ended up rating this book a 3.5 stars, and that doesn't sound great, but it was a very decent book. It was kind of like a YA dystopian type read, but it did have some magic in it, so I don't know if you would want to call it a fantasy. But the reason why I didn't rate it higher was because the beginning was a slow start, so it felt like it took forever before things picked up. It took a really long time for this book to pick up. The beginning of the book was just very much like going about your daily routine. This girl who is helping her family with their house and their beekeepers, and so she's helping her dad take care of the bees and the honey, and they live in kind of like a small town that seems it's very rural and it's away from civilization. They have like one small town doctor. It's just very small, and it seems like it would be a really close, tight-knit community, which in a way it was. However, some weird stuff starts happening in the town. I'm not going to spoil anything, and the ending I felt like was very abrupt. It went really quick. Like, once I reached the last 50 to 100 pages, I flew through it, but it's so information heavy at the end, and it made sense. It did answer a lot of questions, but at the same time, I didn't like how it left off. Like, it didn't give me a good feeling with how this book ended off. I liked the plot line. I liked the idea of people wanting things and never having enough, and what are the lengths that you would go to get what you want. That was kind of the whole premise behind it, and how those small favors, those small actions can have like a ripple effect and a domino effect on everyone around you. So I really liked that whole idea about it. And I did really like the main character. I thought she was very loyal. She was just very protective of her family, trying to keep things together as things were going wrong. I did like the story as a whole. I just wish it had more action. I had more stuff in the beginning of the book instead of just jamming it all in down your throat at the very end. The next two books that I read were Magnolia Parks, The Long Way Home, and Daisy Hates, The Great Undoing. I read these in my Magnolia Parks recap video. I think I ended up rating Magnolia Parks 4 stars and Daisy Hates 4.5 stars. They both are set during the same time, but they're told from two different point of views. And I really liked these better than the first two. I will say I liked Daisy Hates' story more just because of the world she was in. Her family is like a part of this crime lord organization, and so there was just a lot more action in her point of view, and I felt like the relationship between her and the guy. I liked it better in this book than I did Magnolia and her guy in that book. I didn't mind this series, and I know there's more coming out, and I am planning on reading those when they come out. The next 4 books that I read, this is a fantasy series, and I read all 4 back to back to back to back, and that is the Lachlan Feud series. So the first book is Scarlet Princess, then it's Tarnished Crown, then it's Crimson Kingdom, and then it's Obsidian Throne. I really enjoyed this series. It was such a fast-paced fantasy series for me to read. I read all 4 of these books, I think, within 3 days. I would binge one day, and then I would start the second one, and then binge that one, moving into the second day, and then continue on like that. And I really enjoyed the series. I really liked the characters in it. The main character, I would say that this series is very similar to ACOTAR in the way that the romance works and everything. I loved the main character and the guy. I just loved them so much. And I'm kind of sad that the series came to an end. It did answer all my questions. It did wrap up really nicely, which I'm happy about. And the way that I ended up rating these books, I rated Scarlet Princess, the first book, a 3.5 stars. The second book, I rated 4 stars. The third book, I rated 4.25 stars. And the fourth book, I rated 4.5 stars. So it just steadily got better and better. I loved every single one of these books, and I think I'm going to try to look and see if this author has more fantasy books, because I just really enjoyed the writing style. It was really quick, short chapters, which I enjoyed, and I feel like it just, the plot and everything, the action that was going on was very fast-paced and sucked me in. The next book that I read this book in my finishing my summer TBR video vlog. The first book I read was The Twice Cursed Serpent. I rated this one a 3.5 stars. It was a different type of fantasy, which I enjoyed. I was really intrigued by this whole idea of the main character. He's given to this enemy kingdom where they have these people called soul carvers. And the way soul carvers work, these people get their magic by pledging themselves to their goddess, and then they go through these trials that kill a lot of people who try to do it. And if they make it through the trials, then they get to choose how they die. And depending on how they choose how they die, that will determine what magic they get when the goddess brings them back to life. So if you burn alive, then you will have a magic that has to do with fire. So I really enjoyed that whole idea. I was really curious about how the different soul carvers that you meet in this book, how they were able to get their powers or what kind of powers they had. So that was really interesting. However, I didn't like the main character that much. The romance in this book was just not enough for me. I couldn't really feel a connection with the 2 main characters in this book, just because it didn't show enough of their relationship. It didn't show enough of the friendship that eventually led to feelings, and the feelings that eventually led to love. And I wish I just got to see more. I know that there's a second book, and I have not read that yet. And I'm wondering if the second book will give me more of those 2 characters. However, in this one, I didn't really like how quickly that they fell for each other. The main character is trying to break a curse, and if she breaks the curse, then she'll be set free in this enemy kingdom. So it's all about her trying to break the curse and figure out like if there's some sort of riddle and how to solve it. It was decent. I maybe in the future will read the second book. I'm not 100% sure yet, but it's not super high on my TBR at the moment, but I did enjoy this one for what it was. The next book that I read was The Devil in the Dark Water. This is the author that wrote The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which I will be reading this winter, and I'm really excited about that. This book actually took me by surprise. I was dreading this one a lot, and I ended up rating this one a 3.75 stars. It definitely felt like an Agatha Christie novel, and it was a murder mystery, and it just had a really interesting and cool group of characters in this book. I really liked the way everything came about. However, I felt like the ending, it took me by surprise. It had a pretty big plot twist that I did not see coming, and it was very much like a whodunit type book. I liked the style of the writing in this book, and that's why I want to read more by this author, and I'm excited to read his other book. The next book I read was Ship of Theseus. Now this book I had to read over a longer period of time. I did end up finishing it, and I did end up rating it a 3 stars. The reason why I gave it 3 was just because I felt like the story, it was just very hard to read, and I felt like the story was kind of slower and kind of confusing because you would go back and forth between the story and then the two characters who are writing in the margins. I did enjoy the two characters who were writing back and forth, who were having this like pen pal relationship. I really liked their relationship in this, and I liked getting to see their thoughts throughout the whole story. There were also parts where they were using different colored pens, and you could tell like some of their comments, they came back through and wrote another comment in the future. So that was a whole nother element that I wasn't expecting, and when I got that, then I felt like, you know, that added more intrigue on like what was happening in their personal life. It definitely left you kind of on the edge of your seat here, seeing their comments back and forth, because you're wondering what happened in the future when they started out as just these basic friends who were writing back and forth. And it was cool getting to see how that went through the whole book. And it was an experience. I did like the type of book it was. I'm hoping I can find more books like this maybe in the future to read, because I felt like this was a good challenge for myself. As a reader who usually sticks within the same genres, I thought this one was outside of my comfort zone, and I did like that, and I want to eventually be able to read more books like this, so I did enjoy it in that way. This one did take me a while, and I usually get through books pretty quickly, so if that's intimidating, I probably wouldn't recommend this for you. The next book I read was Business or Pleasure by Rachel Lynn Solomon. She is the one who wrote The X Talk, which I read last year, I think. And I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars. I loved the two main characters in this book. I thought their relationship was just really deep. And I loved seeing how they came from being this like very cringeworthy couple to how genuine and loving they were towards the end. I really liked it. And I liked getting to see them going from all these different like Comic-Cons, because the main guy in this book, he is from like a Teen Wolf type show from his teenage years, and I really liked getting to see them going to all these different Comic-Cons, because I think that'd be really cool to go to in real life. Honestly, what just made this book for me was the relationship. I loved getting to see them communicate with each other and learn from each other and just grow, honestly. And I didn't know how it was going to end up, but I am happy with how it turned out. I really enjoyed this one. And the last book that I read this month was The Wild Hunt by Emma Seckel. This book, I went into it with really high hopes. However, I didn't love it like I wanted to. I don't know if it's because I went in with such high hopes and that was kind of a letdown, but I ended up giving this book a 2.5 stars. The reason why was just because it was a very slow start. The beginning of, like, I would say the first half of the book was just very slow. And also the world that you're in, it's on this island, kind of similar to Small Favors in the way that it was like a very small, tight-knit community that relies on each other for different things. And I was hoping that I would fall in love with these characters. However, I was very confused for most of this book. A lot of this book, the main character is having like these dreams or these like flashes or flashbacks of stuff. And I was so confused on where that was going to go. It is explained towards the end what's going on. However, I was just so confused with that. And the romance that happened in this book, I didn't love it. I didn't really feel the connection I wanted to feel with them. And the ending was very quick and also very confusing. I didn't understand it the first time I read it. I ended up having to go back and reread a few chapters because I honestly just didn't know what was going on. It felt like very mystical and very almost dark, and I didn't understand what was happening or what the characters were doing. And then at the end you read about it and you're like, oh, that's what was happening. And it just didn't make sense in the moment. So I spent a good portion of this book just confused. And I don't know if it was just the way the author worded things or wrote the chapters. I also thought this was more of like a fantasy type book. It was more like a historical fiction book because it's set after World War II, and you get to see a lot of the trauma that happened through World War II with the men who went to war and came back and the ones who didn't come back. It just wasn't what I was expecting. I did not think that that is where this book was going to go. There's these birds that are like crow creatures, and the myth is that all these crows, they come in groups of 3, and they are people who died and had unfinished business. these birds are starting to get out of control. They're starting to attack people and invade homes, and like things like that are starting to happen on the island. People are going missing, and so the main characters are trying to find this boy who goes missing, who they grew up with and were friends with, and it was just really odd. It wasn't for me, sadly. So those are the 12 books that I read in the month of August. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully you got some ideas for some books to read in the future. I personally am really excited for September. I have so many good books that I'm just ready to start reading. I'm really excited to release my fall TBR video, which will come out next week. And I'm really excited to get into those because they all are very fall themed, and I'm ready for fall. I will see you all in my next video.